There's lots of talk in Australia now of getting things started again and lifting restrictions, but there's been a reminder this morning of the lingering presence of COVID-19 in the Australian community. So another day with a total of more than 20 cases to report for, this is just for New South Wales and Victoria. So Victoria 17 cases and New South Wales 9. 5 of those in New South Wales, the source is unknown, and 6 in Victoria. And this comes as a death toll in the US passes 70,000, and the UK now has the worst death toll in Europe. So here are today's key developments in our coronavirus coverage. So Victoria has recorded another 17 new cases overnight. 4 of those are linked to the Melbourne Meatworks cluster, which now has a total of 49 cases. Nearly 729,000 organisations have signed up for the JobKeeper wage subsidy program, according to data from the federal government. Payments through the program will begin this week. And interestingly, we heard from Labor's Jim Chalmers on that just in the last 10 or 15 minutes or so. And there was, pretty strong language saying the scheme had been botched and badly mishandled. So there's some of the strongest language we've heard so far through this pandemic in terms of Labor criticism of how the government has approached things. So no doubt we'll hear more on that through the day. The New South Wales opposition says the state's Premier and Health Minister must be involved in the Ruby Princess COVID-19 inquiry. A health official broke down at the Special Commission yesterday while apologising for failures in dealing with the outbreak on board the ship. The inquiry continues today. The UK has now eclipsed Italy to become the worst hit country in Europe. Both countries have recorded more than 29,000 deaths, although Britain's Office of National Statistics puts its true toll at more than 32,000. The Victorian government will implement a program to assist casual workers usually employed by the state and are not covered by the Commonwealth's JobKeeper scheme. Let's take a listen to what the Victorian Treasurer has had to say this morning.
The total number of coronavirus cases is now 1,440. That's an increase of 17 since yesterday. Of these, 4 are linked to the Cedar Meats outbreak, taking the total for that cluster to 49. 7 of today's cases are overseas travellers in mandatory quarantine. 6 remain under investigation. So we've had no new deaths reported overnight. The total number of deaths, sadly, in Victoria stands at 18. Currently, 8 people are in hospital. This figure includes 6 patients who are in intensive care. Total numbers of tests completed in Victoria is now 162,000. That's 10,000 more than since yesterday. Many more samples from our drive-through shopping centre clinics are still being processed. 145 cases acquired in Victoria could indicate community transmissions and an increase of 2 since yesterday. I'm announcing that we're protecting thousands of jobs for casual public sector workers who've been stood down because of coronavirus. These are workers who are not covered by the Commonwealth's JobKeeper program. As you'd appreciate, state employees are not covered by the JobKeeper program. So in order to ensure that these workers are adequately catered for, we are putting in place comparable type arrangements to the JobKeeper. So we're going to fix that gap by making sure that some 3,000 casual workers, these are people who work for agencies of government, for example, and that they will receive fortnightly payments of some $1,500 before tax until September. So from the 27th of April in effect to September, by being redeployed to other public sector roles where demand is high. So firstly, an indication of a willingness to be redeployed is a requirement, and those casual workers will be adequately protected. So that's also part of a broader objective by the government to put in place a broader public sector IR framework, which I've recently and urgently convened, involving public sector unions. And what this is sought to do is to ensure that we have an agreement around how we ensure staff get the protection that they need and that the community gets the access to redeployed workforce to the areas where need is most apparent. So whilst many public sector organisations, such as those in cultural and sports sectors, have been hard hit, others, of course, are dealing with a substantial surge in demand for their services, and most notably, of course, in the health sector. So that's why the government will extend the Jobs and Skill Exchange program to all public sector workers to basically match displaced workers with employers in the public sector who actually need reinforcements, in effect.
So Victorian Treasurer Tim Pallas speaking there just in the last hour or so. So overnight, 17 new confirmed cases in Victoria, 6 of those from unknown sources. So they're still trying to work out how 6 of those people actually caught the virus. In New South Wales, let's take a look at New South Wales now. It had 9 new coronavirus infections overnight, and 5 of those cases, the source is unknown. Nearly 7,000 people were tested in the state yesterday. Premier Gladys Berejiklian is calling for as many people to come forward and be tested as soon as possible.
We really want to get the average testing rates up to 8,000 and more every day, including weekends. So if you have even the mildest symptoms, if you work with vulnerable people, if you work anywhere and you're concerned and you have a number of people you're in contact with, please come forward and get tested. Please know that as we lift restrictions during the month of May, as there is more activity, whether it's at school, whether it's dropping children off, whether it's more retail, whether it's people visiting each other in their homes, we know that level of activity means there is likely to be more cases. That's why we really, really need everybody who has even the mildest symptoms to come forward. And as we get into the colder weeks and months, we know people might think they've got a common cold or they might think they've got the flu. Don't take the risk. If you have the mildest symptoms, please come forward and get tested. The more cases we identify, the better we can stop the spread, and that's really, really critical. I also want to say to many businesses, in particular retail businesses, through Service New South Wales, we've provided additional information if you want to open your doors and welcome customers again. We know that a number of retail shops have already started to do that, and a number are already making plans during the month of May to do that. So if you're somebody that is the proprietor or a manager, please make sure you keep your customers safe by having the good social distancing practices, having the hygiene available on site, and making sure that people respect the 4 square metre rule and the 1.5 metre rule between individuals. And in particular, if you're a customer going into those shops, please make sure that you exercise caution and safety, because we do want as many businesses as possible to reopen their doors, and we want them to stay open. And that means whether you're a customer or someone managing the business, please make sure you put safety first, because you can have a COVID-safe environment. The health experts tell us what we need to do, so please make sure you do that. If you need any further information, please go to Service New South Wales or call 13 77 88, and there will be ample information there to assist you.
Gladys Berejiklian there speaking about the situation in New South Wales. So we've heard about Victoria and New South Wales. In Queensland, the Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk reported that good news this morning. No new cases for Queensland in the past 24 hours. In Tasmania, there were 2 new cases up to 6 p.m. last night, and one of them was a healthcare worker who was a worker at the Launceston General Hospital. The officials there in Tasmania said, though, that that worker had not been at work for 2 weeks because they'd been ill, but testing is being done around that person to see if there were any other people who worked near them or they attended to who may have caught the virus. The infection rate in Italy continues to fall, with the lowest number of new cases for 2 months recorded overnight. The country's official death toll of 29,300 is now behind that of the UK and the US, but analysis shows the true figure is probably much higher. Italy, one of the countries worst hit in the world, is now enjoying its second day of slightly relaxed restrictions after an 8-week-long lockdown. US President Donald Trump has dismissed a new report that says America could have up to 3,000 corona deaths a day by June. President Trump says the latest data is inaccurate. At least 19,000 people have died in New York State alone since the outbreak began. Nationally, the US is approaching 1.2 million confirmed cases. And a top US general says it's still unknown whether COVID-19 emerged from a live animal market in China or a laboratory or somewhere else. And he says it was probably not man-made. The remarks stand in contrast to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who says he's seen enormous evidence that the virus emerged from a Chinese laboratory.
There's three fundamental issues here. One is it natural, or was it man-made somehow, or somehow manipulated by man-made procedures? As I said the last time, and I am still where I was the last time, the weight of evidence, nothing's conclusive. The weight of evidence is that it was natural and not man-made. Secondly, the second issue is, was it accidentally released? Did it release naturally into the environment, or was it intentional? We don't have conclusive evidence in any of that, but the weight of evidence is that it was probably not intentional. The third issue is location. Did it come out of the virology lab in Wuhan? Did it occur in the wet market there in Wuhan? Did it occur somewhere else? And the answer to that is we don't know. And as mentioned by many people, various agencies, both civilian and U.S. government, are looking at that. It would help a great deal if the Chinese government would open up and allow inspectors and investigators to go there in full transparency so that the world can know the actual original source of this.
Police in the US have charged 3 members of the same family with murdering a security guard. The guard was shot in the back of the head at a store in Flint, Michigan, after telling the daughter she could not come into the shop without a mask, a rule introduced to stop the spread of coronavirus. The family members, a man, his wife and their son, all face first-degree murder and firearms charges.